All right, so good morning. First things first, I'm going to do a quick demonstration talking about generating line drawings from your CAD model, in this case in Rhino. We'll be using a command called make2d. And in this particular case, we'll be looking at generating some axonometric drawings. So hopefully you guys are familiar with axons after 2 years of architecture school. But if not, they're usually, they're typically called paraline drawings. I can talk just quickly about that and the difference between perspective versus axon. And then a little bit about going back and forth then between Rhino and Illustrator, making sure we're keeping our layers managed and our line weights and line types up to speed so that we can create this sort of visual hierarchy in the drawing, right? To create, emphasis where you want to draw the viewer's eye. And again, the key here is that we're going to be generating some pretty elaborate drawings. And what you'll find is that it's, we have so much geometry that it'll take your computer a little bit of time to do this, maybe 10 minutes even to generate one drawing. But that's 10 minutes that you could be spending eating spaghetti or drinking coffee or binging your favorite show on Netflix while your computer does the work for you. But what you'll find is that you'll be spending a lot of your time not generating the drawing like you would if you were using pen and pencil, but a lot of time in editing the drawing and making it just right. So adjusting the line weights, cleaning things up, drawing a few extra things that might be missing, or deleting some certain line work that you might not want or need. All right, and so it's that, right? I would still argue, even if we're using computer, if you're generating just a drawing in 5 minutes, it's not worth a damn, right? Just like if you're using a pencil, right? Really nice drawings take hours, right? And I would argue that's, kind of similar here still, even using the computer, right? Even if the what you're doing, maybe the focus is shifted towards editing rather than just, simply performing the drawing and generating the lines. But still there's a lot of craft that goes into these in order to make them really nice drawings, right? And that is our craft, right? We don't make buildings, we make drawings of buildings. So we got to get really good at that, right? So anyway, first things first, I'm just going to pick up where we left off in my model here. We were talking about perspectives. In this case, this kind of resembles a one-point perspective in that, if this resembles a corridor, I'm sort of looking down its axis, right? And you can see that there's maybe a vanishing point here sort of in the center. And it's sort of, all of the sort of lines running sort of parallel with my eyesight sort of converge this to this vanishing point sort of in the center of the composition. And I just mentioned that we're going to be dealing with axons this time around. So, what's the key difference? Anybody want to sort of volunteer what the key difference between an axon versus a perspective is? An isometric drawing or axonometric drawing? They both sort of see things in 3 dimensions, right? You guys know what axons are? I hope you guys do. If not, then oof. Who wants to volunteer? Anybody want to speak up? Here, I'll just generate an axon drawing right here. Anyone? Oh gosh, this is not good. I hope you guys know this, but I'll review it just in case you don't. Right, so whereas a cube in perspective might look something like this, right? Let's say this is a 2-point perspective. And so our cube might look, like this, whereas these edges converge at a vanishing point over here, and these edges can converge over at a vanishing point over here, right? Sort of like how we see with our binocular vision with our 2 eyes, or with the camera, right? An axon is different in that we don't have these vanishing points, right? And so what Rhino produces is what's called a 30-30 axon, right? So if we think about this for a moment, let's think about a horizontal and a vertical axis, right? What it does is it generates everything in parallel along these 30 degrees up from the horizontal, right? And so there are no vanishing points. So it is very much an abstraction from how we see things 3-dimensionally, right? And everything remains true in its dimension, right? So in other words, if this is 20 meters and this is 20 or 15 meters, right? We would measure those out, and those would always be the same scale, right? We wouldn't. Whereas in perspective, right? A person up here. Oh, sorry. Let me go back to my freehand drawing tool. There we go. A person. Try to draw a person with my mouse. It's really difficult, right? Up here, close to our eyeball, might appear this size, right? And somebody back here might then appear smaller, right? Even if they're the same size, right? So as things get further away from our eye in perspective, they appear smaller, right? As they get closer, they appear larger or closer to full size. And Axon, right? This is a measured drawing, just like our ortho drawings, they're always going to be to scale, right? So let's say this was quarter scale and this was supposed to be 20 feet, then this would be quarter scale would be 5 inches, right? Because every inch would be 5 feet, 20 feet, that would measure out to 4 inches, right? So, and regardless, if we had something similar, but it was further back in the axon, it would still be the exact same size because we don't have that sort of foreshortening that we do in perspective. So I hope that makes sense. And I hope you guys went over that a lot in first and second year. I really hope. And I'm going to go ahead and clear that out and let's move on. So I took my perspective view. I've already switched it to what I call parallel view, but let me just show you what I did. Let me go ahead and double click this, right? So that my view, I just have one viewport filling my screen. And just like when I went to set perspective view or save a view, I go to set view, right? So I go into this viewport, a label, and I click this to pull down the menu. And sometime today, here we go, set view. And here are all the views available to me. I can go with my ortho views like top, bottom, left, right, front, back, right? There are several different perspective projection settings, right? So perspective versus 2-point perspective. And then we have underneath that isometric. Now you'll remember this menu because this is how we set perspective. This is how we also went to viewport properties and changed the camera settings from something like 50 millimeter down to like 20 millimeter, right? To get a sort of wider angle lens. And this is also, if we go to named views, this is how we can save the views, right? Once we set up the perfect, let's say, interior perspective or whatever, right? So if I go to isometric, right, you'll see that there's 4 different settings here, four different options here. One is northeast, then northwest, southeast, southwest. So I just do northeast. There it is. So that's a northeast 30-30 isometric drawing. I can go over here, go back to this menu, and instead of saying northeast, I can go to northwest. And basically just rotates it around 90 degrees. Again, 30-30. Now we have non-orthogonal geometry, everything's curved. However, this is still in isometric, so it's still parallel. So if we had, let's say, any lines parallel to these X and Y axes, right, they would remain parallel to these X and Y axes. They don't actually converge to a vanishing point like in perspective view. Right? We can go around and we can look at all 4 sort of vantage points here. Southeast. Southeast looks kind of nice. I might pick that, right? Oh, actually, I'll go back to northeast since I already did that one. All right, so anyway, I'll just go back to northeast, and there we are, right? But I'm going to pick a view that I can see the most stuff in and it looks the best. And you know, I think that's maybe subjective, and it also has to do with the amount of trusses and the geometries that you're deploying the trusses along, right? So not everybody might pick northeast, for instance, right? When you're going through and doing this exercise step by step. But just for practice sake, I'm just going through this workflow. I picked northeast isometric. It'll say parallel up here, meaning that again, it's a 3-dimensional projection here, but in this projection, all lines are parallel. All sort of parallel lines remain parallel. They don't converge to a vanishing point. All right, I think that's really important to say. And again, I hope that's intuitively obvious now after you've probably generated these. You guys had to draw these Axon drawings in a second year at some point, right? Or maybe in 180.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Just making sure. Whew. All right. Breathe in, breathe out. I'll calm down. All right, great. Perfect. All right. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to generate a line drawing from this surface model, right? So all these components are surfaces. All of the edges we see are just edges of surfaces. All of these, all the grid on the surface are just isoperimetric curves along the sub D or the surface, right? I want to actually convert this into a line drawing that I can bring into Illustrator, right? Because that's what Illustrator does. It helps us generate and modify vector drawings. And we can then adjust line weights and line types and line coloration and compose a really super awesome, detailed, highly complex drawing, right? And right now, that's not the case, right? So we talked about rendering, which gives us pixel by pixel a representation of this, using light and camera and materials. In this case, what I want is a line drawing, and we can do a line drawing actually quite simply, okay? And so the one command, if you write anything down from today, the one command to write down is make 2D, all one word, make 2D. I'll just type in the command, make 2, literally the numeral 2, and then D, right? Hopefully you can see that in my command line. I'm gonna hit enter, all right? And so first things first, it's gonna ask me in the command line, select the objects to draw. And so I'm just gonna select everything here, all right? Now, before class, I saved out a version of this file and I deleted the ground plane because I didn't want that. And I deleted those sort of copied surfaces that were on either end because those looked kind of goofy, right? When I'm looking at this thing from, sort of overall in Axon, right? So I'm just taking, sort of the two walls that I'm working within, right? And then all those trusses I generated for the roof and the trusses I generated in the inside vertically, right? And I'm selecting them all at once, right? And when it says press enter when done, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit enter, right? Press enter when done. Okay, sorry, I guess it just undid. Yikes, what is going on here? All right. There we go. Sorry, I'm just trying to select everything all at once. I don't know why it's not. And I'm going to hit enter. All right. Sorry. So I select everything that I want to draw, or have Rhino draw for me. And now once I hit enter, once I've selected everything, it brings up this box. Let's look at these options very carefully. First of all, it's going to say, okay, the current view is set to parallel. Do you want me to draw this view? Or did you want me to draw top view, front view, right view, right? I'm going to leave this as parallel because that's exactly the drawing I want to draw, this ISO, this axonometric drawing. Projection from the view, right? So I'm just going to leave this as default. From input objects, that's fine, right? I think this is default object properties. This box is checked. I'm going to go through here and be very careful, right? I'm going to say, yes, I want tangent edges. No, I do not want hidden lines. So that's unchecked. Yes, I want the scene silhouette. This one's grayed out, so it doesn't matter if it's checked or not because it doesn't apply here. And for viewport rectangle, I'm going to say yes, check. Group output, uncheck, register with previous, uncheck, right? So this is the settings that I want. Check, uncheck, check. Doesn't matter, check, uncheck, uncheck, right? So if you're going back and watching this video and trying to follow along later, you can go back here and sort of look. But I've turned hidden lines off, but I've turned tangent edges, scene silhouette, and viewport rectangle on, right? Everything else is turned off. When I hit OK, it's going to take a good amount of time, maybe 5, 6, maybe even 8 minutes to generate a drawing for me, all right? So let's talk about this just for a moment. And the reason why is I want to sort of talk about this. There's a lot of geometry here. And so it's going to go through everything and try to draw a hidden line drawing of this stuff for you. So it will take a little while, right? Now, the trade-off is that it might take your computer 8 minutes, and your computer might not be all that responsive for 8 to 10 minutes. But the value here is that you don't have to spend 8 days nonstop, 24/7, trying to draw all of these little tiny itty bitty details of all of these crisscrosses and trusses and webbing and cords and all that other stuff, right? So that's the trade-off, right? So it's going to take your computer a little bit of time here. So what I recommend doing before you go through this and actually do the make 2D operation is one, turn all the other apps that you have off. Turn off Spotify, turn off your web browser. For sure, turn off any other instances of Rhino, Photoshop, Illustrator, anything else that can be taking up memory, because this will be a memory intensive operation, right? It'll take processor and memory. And so, again, if you've been doing a lot of stuff that's been eating up a lot of your memory, you might reboot before you go do this step, right? Just to make sure that it goes smoothly and it does it as quickly as it can, right? Two, don't do this when you don't have your power cable and it says that your computer's about to shut off because you only have 1% of your battery left, or right as you're waiting for the shuttle bus and you might have to close your laptop in 30 seconds, right? In other words, budget 10 to 15 minutes for this thing to run the operation and complete so that you can look at it and then save it afterwards, right? This is actually not a bad thing if you think about it. This is where you can step away for 10 to 15 minutes and let the computer do some of your work for you while you go get a cup of coffee or eat some dinner or turn on the TV and binge watch the next 2 episodes of your favorite show on Hulu or something, right? So in other words, just work smart about this, right? Understand that your computer is going to be tied up for a few minutes, and then account for that, right? And budget your time accordingly, right? So once I hit OK, this would actually take about 10 minutes or so. I think when I did this not too long ago, right before class, it took about 5 to 6 minutes for me, right? That's on MacBook Pro running Windows on top of Mac OS. So that wasn't so bad. What you'll see is that there'll be a blue progress bar sort of telling you the progress down here. And so you can monitor things down there if you want. I'm going to go ahead and cancel. This is like a cooking show in that I don't want to tie my machine up for 6 minutes of just dead air time. And I'll just show you what it did. So once this finishes, in the top view, it's going to place this drawing in your XY plane, right? So you're going to see it in top view, flattened out in the sort of positive X, positive Y quadrant, right? And I'm turn on the layers and you'll see what it did, right? There it is, right? Now I moved it out of the way just in case I actually try to generate something new here, right? So I moved it down in my XY, but here's just basically a bunch of curves, right? All drawn out for you by Rhino. So you don't have to redraw all this. It's only lines and curves, right? Each one, right? And it generated a set of layers over here for me. Okay, so there's a larger primary layer called make2d. And so everything that I generated with that make2d command is broken down into a set of sublayers in this make2d layer. So there's a set of visible curves that it made, visible curves, the scene silhouettes, the curved tangents, and there's also something called viewport rectangle, and they're all broken down into their own layers. That's really important, and that really comes in handy because there's certain layers or certain types of curves that we're going to select in Illustrator and turn down in line weight, make really thin and skinny. There's certain curves that we might turn up line weight on and make them thicker, right? And so if we maintain our layer management from Rhino, when we bring this from Rhino into Illustrator, that makes our lives a lot more, or a lot less difficult, right? A lot easier, okay? A lot quicker. All right, so I still have my model, right? These are all the surfaces over here. And at the same time, you can see I have my drawing laid out on the XY plane here for me, right? This is all just a line drawing, right, under these layers. So I'm going to go to top view now, since this is in the XY plane, right? I can go to top view and get a nice orthographic view of my drawing. I'm going to select all of this drawing, not the model, the drawing of the model, right? The output of that make2d. I'm going to select everything. That's why it's turned pink on my screen. It might look yellow when you select it on your screen, right? And I'm going to go to File, pull down, Export selected, right? So I selected everything. Now I'm going to export what I just selected, right? File, pull down, Export selected. And it'll pop up a box and it'll say, okay, hotshot, what file name do you want to make this thing and what kind of file do you want to save it as, right? So by default, file type is probably set to 3DM. You can see that I can generate all sorts of files. If I was going to bring this into AutoCAD, I could take it out as a DXF or a DWG. If I wanted to, let's say I wanted to bring my model geometry and 3D printed. I could take it out as a step file or as an STL file. If I wanted to bring it into 3D Studio Max, I could bring it out as a 3ds file. If I wanted to bring it into Revit, I think I can actually generate a Revit file in here. Maybe I'm wrong. SketchUp, there's a SketchUp file I can generate, etc. Right? Adobe Illustrator, we can actually make Adobe Illustrator file from Rhino, which is perfect because that's exactly where we're going to take this next. All right, and so I'll call this Axon drawing test 02. I already did one earlier and I called that 01, so this one will be 02. So I make sure I save as type Adobe Illustrator.ai, AI meaning Adobe Illustrator. All right, and I'll give it a file name that I can remember, and I'm going to hit save. I'm going to make sure I'm saving it in the right directory that I want. All right, it's going to bring up this box. I'm just going to say snapshot of current view. That's perfectly fine for this case. If we wanted to bring it out to a particular scale, in this case, it's not so concerning. But if I did, I could set it here, right? So this is quarter scale. I could say preserve model scale. Say for every 4 feet, make it 1 inch, and it would keep bringing out a quarter scale or 8th scale, right? Or 16th scale, or some of those other common architectural scales that we use. 16th scale maybe for this, since it's such a large thing, or 32nd scale, right? But I'm just going to say snapshot of current view. I'm not really concerned about scale for this project. And I'm just going to leave this as default and hit OK. You'll see this blue. In this case, my cursor is thinking here. All right, and it said file successfully saved as blah, 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 Axon drawing test 02.ai. And this is the point where I can open up Illustrator, right? I can open up the file that we just generated. All right, here it is. Ta-da! Right, so here's an Illustrator file. Oh, actually, this is one I just modified. I didn't open here. Let me just open up the one I just generated. I won't shortcut this here. You can see all the steps I did really quickly. All right, we're almost done. Again, this is just a sort of demonstrated workflow for those that want to generate an Axon drawing, right? You're going to be generating an Axon drawing for your boards for project 1. And so if you're at this point where you can just keep working and going on, I'm not going to trip you up. But here we'll wrap this up here in a moment, and then very soon I'll let other folks share their screen, and we can do some troubleshooting and get everybody up to speed here. So first things first, in Illustrator, have you guys used Illustrator before?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so first things first is I'm going to change the artboard size. I'm going to go to document setup up here, edit artboards, right? It's telling me that by default, I think I already had this set to letter or 8.5 by 11. I'm about this center point. I'm actually going to change this to, let's say, 11 by 17 or tabloid, right? And hit my cursor. And I go ahead and select all of these items. You can see if I go over here to the right-hand side, I can toggle on my layers, brings out a box with my layers. You can see all those layers that I had in Rhino are now also in Illustrator, which is great because now I can actually select things by layer in Illustrator and start to adjust line weight, line color, etc. Here, and it makes my life a lot easier. First things first, I'm going to go drag this down because my zoom interface is in the way. All right, and I'm going to select all this information, all this drawing stuff. I'm just going to set the width of everything all at once to 17, so it fits my page size here. Take a minute. There's a lot of lines in here. There we are. And then positioning for X and Y. I'm just going to move this over, bump it over to fit inside my document. My X position for top left will be 0. There we are. Nice and flush along the sides. Here, maybe I'll just snap it to the top left corner. Oh no, I put that in width. That's not good. Okay, let me undo that. Sorry, I'll try to act smarter for the rest of this session here. There we are. In the Y dimension as well, right? I have saying the top left of what I have selected will move it directly and precisely into position here. Now you can see as I zoom in, I have a lot of detail and I have a line weight issue, right? This is like when you need a fine line or a pen, but you only have like a Sharpie or the Magnum 66 or something, right? You guys know what the Magnum 66 is? Like the fattest freaking black marker in the market, when you go to the art store. Anyway, so I'm just going to zoom out and I'm going to start to adjust some line weights here, right? So if you look at these layers, first of all, I can turn off the viewport rectangle now. I'm not going to need that. I'm just going to go ahead and turn that layer off. It's still there if I want to turn it back on. I'm just going to turn it off for right now. Tangents, curves, going to go ahead and drag this tangents down underneath the curves. Scene silhouettes will be above curves. So I'm going to go head over to the right-hand side of visible curves, click this circle. It'll select every object on the visible curves layer. Go to my stroke panel here, right? You can see the line weights, right? Small line weight, medium line weight, large line weight. The weight of 1 point seems really overly cumbersome here. I'm just going to turn this down to 0.25. All right, I'm going to go back to my layers. I'm going to go back to also my visible tangents, select all of those, and also go to stroke and set those to a line weight of 0.25. All right, now you can see all of these lines are much lighter. They look a lot better now, given the density and the spacing of them. They're a lot more legible and readable, right? Now here, these scene silhouettes, this is where Rhino sometimes has an issue, right, with curve geometry. The scene silhouette, first of all, we're going to adjust that line weight down, but it didn't get all of the silhouette. And then it did get portions of the silhouette that maybe is just too dense and we can just sort of take out. So here's where we're going to start to edit the drawing, right? So I'm just going to zoom back out, right? First of all, I would argue that for this line weight of 0.25, whatever line weight this is set to is just a little too dark, right? So you guys talk about line weights, I hope, right? I certainly did when the folks who had me in studio in second year, at least in the fall when you had me, right? The sort of idea of emphasis. So one common line weight strategy when it comes to these drawings is to look at that silhouette, right? Any edge that has sort of air or space behind it, and beef it up, right? Now, that's why some of these inside are sort of beefed up, because it was trying to find all of those little holes in the space frame where you could see air beyond. We're going to delete all of those, but I do want the sort of overall silhouette of just the overall shape, right? So we're going to set these line weights down, get them just right. And then I'm going to go through, I'm going to delete a bunch of these things that I don't need here in the center. I'm going to go around and I'm going to very carefully fill in the gaps around the edges that I need, right? So there's going to be some editing involved. And it's going to take some time. Again, just because the computer can do some of this stuff for you and draw the drawing doesn't mean that it's great looking until you go back through and really edit it, right? And you give it weight, emphasis, pop in the places where you want to emphasize things, right? So I'm going to go to the scene silhouette curves layer, select everything there, go to my line weight. 1.4173 points is a little too much. Maybe I'll go and I'll try 0.75. Yeah, that's nice. I like that when I look at it around the overall shape. All right, and now I'm just going to go ahead and turn off all the other layers and just leave the scene silhouette curves on, right? So here's where I might, quickly start to go around and start to delete. I know I don't need all of these. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this, right? And then I know I'm going to have to go around the edges and start to fill in where there's gaps and start to delete some of the little details that I don't need here, right? Okay, so nothing's foolproof, right? In other words, a computer doesn't know what a great drawing looks like. You know what a great drawing looks like, right? And so you're going to have to go back and forth here and sort of, tweak and fine tune, right? So we can never just remove, again, that sort of human touch to these things, right? You want a really nice crafted drawing. But at the same time, I can start to zoom in here. Yeah, maybe I turn these other layers on, but I lock them, right? The visible curves, all these smaller lines. And that way I can accidentally delete something or move something that I don't want. I'm just going to go through and just keep deleting some of these thicker dudes. Yeah, right here, right? Yeah, I just want this outside one. Yeah, that's looking nicer, right? I think anyway. And I'm grading you, so what I think counts, I think, for something, right? So anyway, I might zoom in a couple places. Again, control in a PC, command on Mac OS. Command plus, you zoom in, command minus, zoom out, command 0 fits the entire document back to your screen, right, to sort of max zoom out. Right. So here I have a gap, and I might just draw one of those lines here. Make sure that scene select curve is the active layer, and fill in that gap right like that. And if you have smart guides and stuff turned on, right, view smart guides, then it becomes really easy, I think, to snap to certain things and just, quickly ad lib a few edges here when where you need to clean things up. None of this is going to be completely perfect, right? Because these are round pipes and there's so many of them. I'm not going to worry about cleanup of some of these stray lines here, right? And when I'm zoomed in, right, we can see each tree, right? But when I zoom out, I see the forest. And that's what I'm concerned about, the overall composition, right? So I'm not necessarily going to go through and clean up every single little thing here that I see, but I am going to get rid of all of these sort of scene select curves that I don't need here in the center, right? And then where I have some gaps, like I noticed down here, there was another gap. Just go around. Again, I'm just going to go around and just get this. Here's an extra one. I'll just try to close that up, right? So that it's just going around the outside, just the outside silhouette. Here's another instance, right, where I just need to just give it a little TLC there. Just make it perfect. Zoom out a bit. It's getting hard to, here's a gap, right? So now you need to come in here and draw in that line. Oh yeah, look at that. Now that feels really good, doesn't it? All right. Right here as well, right? So I have a gap here and down to here. Just go ahead and do that. Try to snap right there, snap there, and snap there. All right. We zoom out, we start to see, yeah, there we are. All right, maybe I move this down to make sure it's at the silhouette. Now I'm just gonna quickly close that gap with another line. Make sure I'm snapping in the right places here. Here's another one. I have a curve here, uh-oh. So what can I do? One thing I could do is I could unlock this, the layer that this smaller curve is on. I can copy, right? Lock those back up, make this my active layer again, and then paste in place. Oh, it's going to say, oh, it's still going to be on the same layer. So I'll go ahead and then with just that one that I pasted in, I'm going to move it to the scene silhouette layer and lock this again. I'll go ahead and change the line weight so that it matches. I can use the eyedropper tool and match it up with that one. Or I can go over here and change it to 0.75, whatever is easiest, right? If I need to trim this, I could try to resize it like I have. This is quite a bit of line though. So one of the things I can do if I need to trim something quickly, line by line here. Let's see, how do I do that? I can't remember. Not the slice tool. That would be too easy. Let's see. Select these two curves. This one I'll use to cut this one. I think I go to Object, Path, and divide objects below. More than one object is selected. Oh, what? All right. This shouldn't be so hard. There's a quicker way of doing this. What is it? I can't remember at the moment. I'll find that by Wednesday. This is the annoying part though. Anyway, but again, it's about going around and just cleaning this up, right? So going around the edges, right? Deleting things that you don't need, adding some things that you do need. And again, I have a bunch of line work over here that's way thick that I don't need. I'd probably start to go through and start deleting that stuff away, right? Carefully. And then just making sure that the edges are filled in just around that edge, right? Just go through and get rid of all the other silhouette stuff, okay? So I just wanted to sort of demonstrate that, whet your appetite for that. We'll go over this again, but we'll also generate some other types of axons on Wednesday as part of the first sort of half of the class demonstration. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. And I'm gonna stop recording.